certainly played itself well into the feudal system, which we operate under today. But again, when a child is born, whether it's a result of a marriage license or not, is of no particular consequence. The question is whether or not that child is registered, which creates an exemption. Now, let me just briefly divert back to the New Testament. Why did Joseph and Mary go back to the city of their nativity? And so when the child Jesus was born, he was registered, which created the exemption from taxation, as he later referred to when one of the apostles asked him a question about tax. He said, well, so who do you tax? The children or the foreigners? Now, so again, I hate to go back to the New Testament again, but there's so much there. But let's talk about in our modern time, 2,000 years later. All right, so when a child is born, it's considered to be original issue. And so people need to go study that word to see what it means and so forth. But when that original issue is registered in the commercial registry, that creates an exemption from taxation. Now, when a child is born in a hospital or otherwise, well, let's say they are born in a hospital, and that is, there is an application that is made for a live birth. Application for a live birth. Now, how do you spell that word birth?
B-I-R, yeah.
Yeah, most people spell it B-I-R-T-H. Why don't you spell it B-E-R-T-H?
Like a ship's berth.
Yeah, a little play on words there, but that's what it is. All right, so we have an application for a safe port, for the baby. It needs to be maintained as being safe, and so we make an application for a birth, and in consequence of that, the registration of that birth creates the exemption from taxation. Now, as proof of that exemption, all you have to do is go to probate any day of the week to some party who has died and left a will, and certain amounts of their property is exempt taxation. For instance, my brother died 2.5 years ago, and his exemption was worth $750,000, although his estate came nowhere close to that. In today's world, most of the children who are born probably have an exemption that's valued at somewhere around $2 million. Now, I'm going to get back to this exemption here in a minute, because this is an important concept. All right, so the application for live birth is created. It's usually registered in the county. Certain documents are created from that point, which go to the Department of Commerce. Those documents from the Department of Commerce go to the Depository Trust Company in New York. And based upon those documents, then the Depository Trust Company creates 10 bonds valued at $3.5 billion per bond. Now, it's based on those bonds the currency is created. And if you'll look on what you're calling your Social Security card, on the back there is, in fact, a number. Now, that number on there will indicate to you which Federal Reserve Bank is holding your exemption. Now, there's many ways to deal with that exemption before you die. And so as part of our commercial redemption process, we have shown people how to deal with that exemption before you die. And we've been using it successfully for a very long time.
How do you find out which Federal Reserve Bank is holding your stock?
It'll have a letter in front of the number. Like, for instance, it'll be E or D. And if you go look at the list of 12 Federal Reserve banks, the letter will refer to whichever one of those that is. See, I think A is, I don't know if it's New York or, anyway, it'll be, New York, Atlanta,
Right, I've seen the codes.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
yeah.
So there's a letter that is the code of the bank.
Yes, and that tells you which Federal Reserve Bank is holding and using your exemption.
Okay, now you also said something that really was a big thing. And again, I'm trying not to interrupt you here, but this one really jumped out. You said that to your understanding, there are 10 accounts issued, each of which
10
is
bonds.
10 bonds issued, each of which is worth $3.5 billion with a B.
Correct.
So that would mean that each person upon birth at present time is creating $35 billion in bonds for the Federal Reserve.
No, it's the DTC that's creating the bonds. You know, these things don't belong to us. It's created for our benefit, but they do not belong to us. They belong to the party that created the bond.
What's the DTC?
Depository Trust Company, 55 Water Street, New York, New York.
Ah.
Now, DTC it works under the DTCC, which is a Depository Trust Company Corporation or something like that. But key to the DTC is to understand they have a holding company called CETA, which is an acronym CEDE, and it is actually CETA that holds the original documents as a holding company. But again, you know, I mean, people get all upset about this and say they're doing all these kind of things. But look around, folks. Look up and down the street. Look in your cities. Look at all the things that we have. And why are we complaining about this system that we have? The only complaint that I personally ever have about this is that if some government official or some agent official does it wrong, if they screw things up, then I got a complaint. But the system itself works very, very well. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. See, this is one of the misconceptions. Everybody's under the impression that all these things have happened by evil-minded people, you know, intent upon our destruction and so forth. But I don't find that to be the case, not at all, especially as I've been involved in the international for some time with some of these other folks you've been talking to, you know, Keith and Neil and all these people, and a long time before that. But I have noticed that people at very high levels are very concerned about the welfare of the planet and the people that are here. And people in the United States, you know, get the idea that everybody's against us. But it's not true. And the system we have works very, very well. It's just when you get one corrupt individual or you get a cabal in there who are ruining the system that we have a problem. But the system itself, which is a very close parallel to the system that was laid out in the New Testament, works very well. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I don't know how to respond to that. I don't know if I can agree with what you're saying. I think that from my understanding, if you are issuing bonds against a person's body when they're born and you're printing money based on that, it's an occult. It's a hello? Okay. We lost you. Yeah, we're back.
Okay.
You know, Jordan Maxwell seems to be pretty specific on the idea that this was designed as sort of black magic on a worldwide scale.
Well, I would disagree with that.
Okay. Why is it?
I don't see this. I don't see the black magic. I see it as a practical way to solve a problem for 6 billion people.
What problem?
Feed, clothes, housing, all these kind of things. Like I say, look up and down the street. You know, we got these houses, we got hospitals, we got roads, we got all kind of facilities, we got fire departments and all manner of things that would not exist if we had not had the system in operation as we have it now. I don't look at the founders of this system as being evil intended people. I look at them with people who let's say they have a situation, they're called upon as civil servants or whatever you want to call them. They say, how do we fix it? How do we provide all these things for the situation that we have? I don't see any black magic in that.
Well, I understand the basis of what you're saying, and I am trying to drill down into the idea that we as bodies and as living people are being used as collateral, and these bonds are being created in which we become the equity. And
no, our labor becomes the equity, not our body.
okay.
Now this is a very good thing, again, because, for those naysayers who are so disgruntled with the system as we have it, go back and be a pagan. Live under their system and see how you like that. Because you'll be riding around on a donkey with a pull cart. We could not have made the advancements that we have now using any other system than the one that we have. I find no fault with that.
Why is there so much secrecy around it then?
Probably for lack of information for the people. You have to understand that in Admiralty, everything is adversarial. It's like a football game. You got the coach and his team on one side and the coach and his team on the other side, and so they put a team out on the field, offense and defense. And does the coach, for the offensive team send a message into their defense that, hey, we're fixing to run a pass play? No, they don't do that. It'd be crazy. So the whole Admiralty system is adversarial in that nature, in as much as if you want to know what's going on out here, then you have to go and seek it out. I mean, I was completely as confused about this whole thing as anybody else was until I started to research and look at things, in their proper light and everything. And at first I was angry about it. I thought, well, how in the world could they do such a thing to me? But then after a while, when I started to look at it to see what the alternative was, a donkey cart, and a donkey, I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. And so the more I looked into it, the more I tried to be empathetic, to the situation, then I started to say, well, yeah, this makes sense. If given the opportunity, maybe this is how I would have solved this problem, or this is how I would set things up, to facilitate, the situation. And so we need to stop casting stones and calling everything voodoo and whatnot. Look around. Look at what we have. We got concrete. We got pavement. We got parks. We have interstate highways. We have ships, airplanes. My goodness gracious. I mean, people need to stop complaining and start looking at what we do have. Be thankful for what you have instead of complaining about it. That makes sense to me.
Well, if you're appreciative of the way that this was designed, then why are we doing an interview where we're talking about filing liens against the Federal Reserve and against European central banks? Because,
again, we have a problem. The Federal Reserve banks went into contract with the owners of the gold to make a payment of 4% per annum on the use of the gold, and they did not do it. So to recover on the injury, then we had to create a commercial lien to create a fact in commerce that this had happened. So we're not talking about maybe this happened, but we're using Admiralty technology to create a fact in commerce. Now, once the fact is created, that overcomes all fictions, and now we can start to we can start to operate in the real world. Now, the lien itself would basically be looked at as an arrest warrant, and that is, we're going to arrest the title to the gold because the 4% that was totaled up, which had never been paid, come to twice the amount of gold that was originally leased.
Right.
And so demand for that interest, I shouldn't say interest, demand for that 4% fee for the use of the gold is now established as a fact and can be acted upon. And so I'm not going to reveal all the strategy that we're working on to deal with that right now, but that's the reason why we created the commercial lien, was to establish the fact that the 4% was due and owing, and it had not been paid. Now that demonstrates the injury. So as injured party, then the owners of the gold can go and seek redress in the real world and not just sit and quibble about it in some ridiculous court someplace.
what would be the force that they could exact to fulfill this redress?
Well, again, I don't think I'm going to give away all the strategies that, that Neil and Keith are working with, but certainly you would call in a mercenary. And the best mercenary I know is Pentagon. That makes sense to me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that mirrors my understanding.
Yeah.
I think it's still difficult for people. It's funny because, my God, I have never, ever been hated so much in my life as I have been since I got involved with you guys. It's horrible.
I don't hate you, David. I think you're doing a great job.
No, I know you don't. But this is not easy. We're seeing 20, 30 letters a day of vicious hate. And it's very hard for me emotionally. I got to admit that.
Do you have a button on your computer that says delete on it?
I do.
Any hate mail comes in, to hit that button, delete. Well, we don't operate on hate. We operate on love. The people
I know that.
Hate, we don't talk to them.
I know that, and I know that these mass arrests are very real. I've spoken to multiple insiders about it, and I know that Neil in particular is in contact with a great number of people talking about this.
Yes.
And I know you can vouch for that. People are not able to comprehend that this could be a good thing. They think that, I don't know, there's just so much out there of everybody is working over every little detail. And one of the things that we keep hearing, we're getting tons of hate about this, is why didn't these guys file a lawsuit like they did before? Why isn't this on public record?
The reason why it is because they came to me on this one. They ran the RICO, through a lawsuit, and that's back before I actually was knew Neil. I knew Keith certainly by that time. But
right, and RICO is a government act that basically prevents against racketeering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at this point in history, we needed to create a real result. You understand, the United States District Court is a fictional court. So when the RICO was sued and the offer came in for the settlement, it was going. How do you think the settlement was going to be paid? It was going to be paid in book money or ledger money. It's still going to be paid in fiction. So it was a fictional suit in a fictional court, the result of which would have been fictional money. Now, in this case right here, we decided that perhaps we wouldn't want to go the fictional route. We wanted to go the substantive route. So the only way to go that way is to put the thing into substantive commerce. And so we created a substantive lien to deal with the gold and the payment of the 4% fee associated with the lease of the gold. So the judgment, if the thing ever does have to go to judgment, the judgment is going to be in substance and not in fiction. Now, this is an important thing. Because we're not playing pity pat with this. This is in the real world. This is not in the fictional world.
And you're saying that there are mercenary forces in the Pentagon that can enforce this lien.
Well, the Pentagon is a mercenary.
Right.
And hopefully there'll be good guys. In the past, we've had some controversies with the way the Pentagon did things, but it appears at this point the attitude within the Pentagon, certainly among the senior officials, is that we need to clean this mess up. And I say, God bless them.
Right.
I don't have enough guns and billy clubs to do it myself. I'm too old to even swing one. But they got people that go out and do these kind of things, make arrests and make things right and so forth. So let them do their job. There's some people in the Pentagon that have good hearts. And they want to see the things set right. I mean, there have been good people in there from, according to Drake, way back in the 70s. I think it goes way back into the 50s, if the reports I read are correct, who want to restore constitutional government and give everybody in the country a fair shake. I'm all for that.
Absolutely. I think in any organization, you're going to have people who basically are there to work their job and honorably protect the people and the Constitution. And they want to raise children and grandchildren, and they just want to have a job and a place to live and a decent life. And they're not doing blood drinking rituals, and they're not, it's a very small percentage.
Very small percentage, but that small percentage has had a great deal of influence. And look here, as long as we keep giving credibility to those kind of people, they'll keep on going. If you look in the scripture again, what did Jesus say about, he says, resist evil. He said, get behind me, Satan.
Right.
You see? Because he did not want to deal with that negative all the time standing in front. He said, get out here behind me. I'm not talking to you. I got other important things I'm going to do. Now, for instance, if you look on the television and you see all these, oh my goodness, the perfect example was those Godfather movies where everybody was romanticizing a bunch of crooks, robbers, and murderers. Now, what in the world is up with that? Why do we romanticize somebody who would take a gun and kill somebody for money?
I just saw another example last night. The hottest movie on iTunes right now is called Contraband with Mark Wahlberg. And I thought personally that the structure of the film, I got drawn into the story. It was very believable. But at the end of the movie, basically what happens is, and I'm sorry to give it away, but he gets away with it.
Yeah.
He ends up with a $20 million, he ends up with a $140 million Jackson Pollock painting that he can sell on the black market for $20 million. He ends up with, I think, $2 million for something else that they did. And they successfully pull off this smuggling. They smuggle drugs, they smuggle currency, and they smuggle this Jackson Pollock painting. They get away with it, and it's the so-called happy ending where this guy now has this fabulous oceanfront house, and all these people died, but he got the money, and he's totally fine, and that's supposed to be your happy ending. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we have so many of those things, but how can we develop a moral consciousness in this nation as long as we keep romanticizing these kind of things? You can't elevate the spiritual level of people as long as they're giving credibility to the mafia.
Right.
It don't work.
Right.
So we're trying to in our small way, I might add, make our contribution to the efforts that are being made by the many, and this thing that, that I worked up with Keith and things we're doing with Neil and stuff like this are only an effort to improve the circumstances on the planet. We're not here to destroy anything. We're here to help improve the things that we already have. Like I told Keith, there's no reason to destroy the Federal Reserve banks. Look at the infrastructure they have. Let's just get the things set on a proper course so that they operate according to their charter, so they do the right thing and stop, creating all these problems. Now that would be a real good solution to a problem rather than simply, destroying it, taking a bulldozer and pushing it over the building. That don't make any sense.
Well, if you actually read the charter, as I'm sure you know, it sounded great. It sounded like there was going to be worldwide prosperity and peace, and it would create an incredible boon for our civilization. And I think they had to write it that way in order to draw people in so that they would agree to it.
Well, I think maybe that, there may have been some evil intent involved in that, but that's what we're doing right now with some of the other operations we have going on, is simply to free up all of those heritage. There's enough money in the interest on the heritage funds to bring complete prosperity to the whole planet. So we are in the process of liberating those funds for the use of the nations to improve the life, of the people that live there. And so, this is a fairly large operation we're talking about here. We're not just talking about some RICO suit. We're not talking about some lien. We're talking about a major operation to influence the liberation of the funds and the money that has already been created, which has been held back by the banks on their false pretenses, but to release that money for the use of the countries and the nations and so forth to improve the prosperity of the people that live there. So this is it's a fairly overreaching. This is a large operation here, folks. This is not a measly little RICO and a measly little commercial lien. I mean, there are big things that are being worked on here, and a great deal more big things than are being reported.
Right, and to that end, I would say that you have created these liens based on an accurate understanding of this admiralty law system, and they have been filed correctly within the basis of that system. And this all has been done on behalf of an alliance of countries that the Pentagon is assisting in to be able to bring these guys to justice.
Yes, and I'll have to tell you, David, I've probably got 2,000 or 3,000 students that are fully as capable of doing what I just did as myself.
Wow, okay.
We've been using these commercial liens. I've been using them ever since about like 1999. Actually, I learned it from a fellow named Hartford Van Dyke. And he made an improvement on what his father was. His father was using common law liens. Actually, Hartford's father and uncle was at Pearl Harbor. I think his Uncle Max is the one that decoded the Japanese communications. And of course, the government locked him up to shut him up. But anyway, these things have been developed, used, especially commercial liens have been developed and used successfully, certainly since the early 90s.
Well, yeah, and
it's nothing new.
I understand that. And I have a guy here in LA, and I haven't done this, but he was describing how you can exonerate debt, you can, pay off things that are not paid by accessing, they call it lassoing your straw man.
Yeah, that's quite a long and technical technology, and sometime when we have, a lot more time to speak on that. But that has been the basis of our commercial redemption processes and so forth, utilizing the exemption and using our Treasury Direct as a pass-through back to the global debt facility to discharge debts. So that's a pretty broad subject there,
right.
One which we've I've been lecturing on this now for about 8 years.
Okay, so just to clarify, then, I think people are by now very well aware that this is not something you pulled out of your ass. You've been doing an incredible amount of research, and that research gets results. You are getting these.
Absolutely.
You are getting these liens to work. It's not some unproven technology.
Oh, no.
It's all legal, but it's legal in a way that most attorneys who are members of the Bar Association, right? And this is where Jordan Maxwell, if he was here, we'd have him chiming in on that. But all this admiralty stuff is written into the very basis of our legal system. And people don't realize that.
Yeah, go back and look at the original Constitution and what did it say about impairing the obligation of contract. It says it can't be done. Now the contracts we're doing the contracts we're doing exist in the Admiralty. That's where we're doing our contracts. We're not contracting in common law. We're contracting in the Admiralty. And so nothing can be done to impair the obligations of those contracts, which is very obvious. That particular commercial lien, that we authored, cannot be impaired, not by any court. We did it on the private side.
Is that why at the very beginning it says this is a certified plain statement of fact? That seems like
Absolutely.
Okay. Why is that there? Why is that such an important statement at the very beginning of the document?
Well, it has to do with the principles the maxims of commerce. Well, if somebody wants to study commerce, go look up on the internet, maxims of commerce.
Okay.
And it'll explain to you about the use of affidavits and all those kind of things. As a matter of fact, if you look on the first part of that, affidavit of obligation, I list probably, 15 or 20 different maxims of commerce on there. See, I established the law of the contract before I even start talking about who the parties are.
Right. Well, I think that to a certain degree, one could argue that in the justice of the jungle, in the justice of the barrel of a gun, he who has the peso has the say-so, and he who has the gun makes the rules. And so these liens wouldn't work at all if it wasn't for the fact that there's somebody who's ready to enforce them.
Actually, no, the liens do work anyway. For instance, when, as I mentioned, a lien is an arrest warrant. That is, it arrests the thing. It arrests the title to the thing, so that the thing itself cannot be moved. This is all admiralty procedure. If you go back in ancient times, when the admiralty, let's say for instance, a ship came into port and there was some kind of disagreement, maybe the sailors' wages or bills of lading or something was wrong, and so they would immediately go to the admiralty with a complaint, and the admiral would have the marshal go out and tie the ship up to the dock. And it couldn't leave anywhere until the matter was settled. And so then when that was done, then the court would notify the owner of the ship that this had been done. And so the owner would have to come into the court with fiduciaries and with sureties to secure the release of the vessel. So this is the exact same thing we're doing with a commercial lien here, is we're creating a certified statement of fact in the form of an arrest warrant. So we're arresting the title. In this instance, we're arresting the title to gold. So the gold can't be moved. It has to stay in port. It's still tied up to the dock and can't move anywhere, which means nobody can use that thing, that ship, that gold, until the matter is resolved. And if the matter is not resolved, then you can go into the levy phase and actually do a seizure on the ship or the gold. Now, we'll probably use the Pentagon as the marshal of the court to go and do that, just like they did back in the admiralty courts. Or if not the Pentagon, U.S. Marshals or somebody.
So at some point, does that mean that all of this stuff is going to have to be explained to the public once this all comes into focus and becomes a real action and a real series of arrests? I mean, it seems like what we're talking about seems so extremely complicated, and I feel like all people are getting is little thumbnails of a body of knowledge that you possess that is much more vast than we can cover in one conversation.
Well, let me just plug it right here and now. If they go to my website and look on the product list, they'll see all these subjects that we've talked about here that we've presented in seminars and webinars and all manner of things. I
have no problem with you plugging that. I'd love to see documentation. So,
well, just have them go to WSSIC.com, which stands for Winston Shrout Solutions in Commerce, and look at the things we have there. Like I say, I've been doing seminars, DVDs, and all these kind of things for about 8 years now, and we've put out a massive amount of information.
So, okay, WSSIC.com.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. And I'm assuming that some of the things that you have, people would pay for to read, and some of the things you have are public and people can just read it on your website without paying for it.
Actually, we haven't published too much on the website itself.
Okay.
I mean, as far as information that could be downloaded and so forth. That particular business is not my business. I don't actually run that. That's a support business, and so they have to keep the lights on.
Right.
So that's up to them. But at the very least, what I've tried to do over the years is to at least leave a footprint in the snow, so that if someone wanted to follow along and find out and learn what I have learned, I've at least broken trail for them. And like I mentioned, this whole process is an art form. It's a way of life.
Well, and I've heard,
it's the blue pill or the red pill.
And what I've heard from people who know about all this stuff is that they will play along. If you learn this stuff and you start playing their game, they will give you what you want.
The first time I did a commercial lien, it was against a police officer, and it made a convert out of me.
Wow. What happened?
Well, I think he's still sitting on a desk. See, the problem was that once I went and did that lien, then that they could no longer insure him. They couldn't put him in a patrol car and put him out on the street because they couldn't get an insurance policy on him because they hadn't paid the lien. So as far as I understand, he's still sitting on a desk. And then as I learned later, as a result of that from other sources, they said that after I did that all the policemen and sheriffs in that area went out and put all their property into trust because they knew I could get it if I wanted to.
Wow.
And one of the things that I got from that more than anything else was I got a whole lot of respect in that area. When I walked into a courtroom and the judge knew who I was, I got a lot better reception than most people generally do. Yeah, I see the benefit of it. I mean, like I say, I did that first commercial lien. The second commercial lien I did was basically against the officers of a corporation. And they went to the attorney general of that state to see what could be done about it. The attorney general looked at it and said, sorry, I can't do anything about that.
Wow.
He knew.
That's heavy. That's a heavy statement.
Yeah, it's heavy. But again, we took those simple principles. You know, a commercial lien for $1.5 million against a police officer, did the same application for 2.5 million metric tons of gold. You know, in for a dime, in for a dollar. It's the same process whether you're dealing here locally or whether you're dealing internationally. It's the same exact process. That's why I said I probably got 2,000 or 3,000 students who studied this stuff that could go do the same thing I just did. It's just that I happened to be the guy on the scene at that time. That's all. There ain't nothing special about me.
How do you think it is that they've been able to keep this so secret from everyone up until now?
Which particular things are you talking about?
I don't know. I mean, we're dealing with a vast subject, and obviously the judges, at some point in their college education, they are learning about all this stuff. They're actually getting all this information, but like you said, there's no book that you can go read that ties this all together.
Well, like I say, I have to say about the education system, when somebody comes to me and says, I got a PhD, or they say, I got a JD, that doesn't tell me what they know. It tells me what they don't know. And I do know what the law schools produce. They produce students who know procedure. They do not study law. They don't study constitutional law. They don't study common law. They don't study admiralty law. They understand procedure. And so that's what attorneys work with. And so when you bring to an attorney something that's substantive, such as a commercial lien, their first reaction is, hey, that's crazy. That's not legal. It doesn't exist in their world. But their world is different than the world of substance. They operate totally with codes, statutes, and fictions. Now we come in with something in reality, and I can see why they would get excited about it. They say, hey, we can't do that. And no, you can't do that. Because obviously an attorney has no civil liabilities anyway. And they don't deal in the real world. And so when they see something like this, it just absolutely sends them into a tizzy because they can't deal with it. It's just like that attorney general told that guy. He says, I can't do anything about that. He couldn't do anything about it. It was totally on the private side. And so, you got parallel universes going on here. When does a judge learn about this? He obviously
He doesn't.
He doesn't learn about it. You understand, when a guy accepts a job as a judge, first off, he's an attorney, and then they make him into a judge, and they give him a book. Say, here, study this book, and this will tell you how to be a judge. And that's all he knows, unless he goes and does independent study. But he is not taught these things. He has to understand. We've had some interesting things. There are some judges out there that are very well educated, but it's hard to find them.
Well, okay, so I'm a little puzzled right now, because if the attorneys don't know about this, and if the judges don't know about this, who the hell does? And then why?
I do.
Okay, well, you're one dude, but
I give out the information as fast and furious as I can. That's why we're having this little interview.
I understand that, but let's try to wrap our heads around something here.
Okay.
How does it exist if nobody knows that it exists? How does it have any value if no one recognizes its value?
Oh, I guarantee it was recognized.
But how?
They knew what it was. You understand, let me go back in history. Back in the 30s, back in 34 and 35, when they created all those bonds on Federal Reserves and all that kind of stuff, don't you know that those bonds were written against a commercial lien?
Ah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So everything, I mean, just because it's new to you today, don't mean that tomorrow or the next day that you can't start to comprehend and put it into your world. I mean, when I first came upon this, I was completely dumbfounded. It took me a long time to sort it out in my mind because I had to change my logic. And that's a hard thing to do, when you spent 50 years thinking one way, and then all of a sudden you're presented with new facts, new evidence, and so forth, and it takes just a little while to wrap your mind around it, as I say. One of the hardest things I have to do as an educator is to uneducate people.
Right. Do U.S. Marshals know more about this than U.S. judges?
Yep.
They do.
A true U.S. Marshal, I think, would, yeah. You understand the U.S. Marshal Service is actually a private corporation.
I did not know that.
Oh, they're not government. They're not a government agency.
I thought that, because we've had interviews with this man Drake, and I grilled him on where the U.S. Marshals located, and he didn't really answer the question. And then other people came in and said that they were part of the Justice Department. But
Justice Department is a corporation, and it's incorporated in Delaware.
Ah.
Everything's been fictionalized. The United States Incorporated is actually a maritime corporation in Puerto Rico. That's why we got to get rid of them. That's what this whole arrest process is to restore fair elections and good constitutional government and so forth, and get rid of the corporations, get them out of our business. Restore reality to the country.
Okay, well, if the U.S. Marshals do know about all this weird, arcane admiralty law stuff.
Well, I'm not saying that each one of them doesn't, but saying about certainly if they're educated at all. You understand, when I started doing all these seminars and putting out all these DVDs and all that kind of stuff, who do you think my biggest customer was?
No idea.
Think about it.
U.S. Marshals and police?
I would have to suggest. Actually, one time I was called in as a witness before a grand jury, and lo and behold, I looked down, and the U.S. attorney that was asking me questions about this situation over here, he had a copy of one of my seminars, DVDs of one of my seminars, sitting right there on his desk.
Oh my gosh!
Where do you get that from? Everybody needs to learn this stuff, and I don't begrudge anybody that wants to know.
Right. I
mean, I know for a fact that some of the big attorney firms back in the East, was ordering my DVDs simply so they would know how to, I don't know if they're trying to find out some way to confuse it or counter it, but I know. I'll tell you, for instance, when I first met Keith, I met him over in Cambodia on a certain thing that I went to. And he didn't know who I was and didn't know anything about me. But after he met me, he was impressed enough that he started calling around to different international contacts, that he knew. And he asked them, do you know Winston Trout? And they all come back and said, yeah, we know him.
Wow.
He said, why am I the only guy on the planet that don't know you? I said, well, you know me now.
Wow.
So word gets around. I already had international recognition, a long time before I got involved with Keith and this process here. And so what I have done with Keith and Neil and the things they're trying to do is I've simply added what little bit I know to implement the things that they're trying to do. And so far, it's been helpful. And as long as I can keep being a help, I'll keep doing it.
Well, now I am aware of this guy who deals with stock market cycle analysis, and he puts out books, and those books are similar to, and they're derived from material by another guy, and he was selling that material for $10,000, and he was getting it. Yeah, he was getting it because of the amount of benefit that people could get out of that technology once they start using it.
Well, it's cost analysis. If you think you can spend $10,000 and make $11,000, that's a good purchase.
Right. My point is that the kind of information that can actually generate large amounts of wealth for people, some people capitalize on that to an extraordinary extreme.
We've had some of those, yeah.
I'm curious to hear what you charge for some of your DVDs based on how much value people could get out of this if they start using this system?
Well, for instance, a typical seminar that I've done in the past usually starts on Friday night and goes through Saturday and Sunday for a total of about 14 hours worth of information, which they reduce down to about 7 or 8 DVDs, along with a CD that has any documents, templates, or anything like that. And most of them go for around like $185 or $90, somewhere in that arena.
Wow. So you're saying that they get all the DVDs, they see the show, and they have all the documents, all the boilerplate that they need to be able to actually go out and put their name on it and enact these liens.
Yes.
And that's less than $200.
In regards to commercial liens, I did a single topic DVD on that, where I went through and described completely the whole history and so forth with commercial liens. And then I provided templates, from several different directions that could be used for different situations. All that went on to one DVD that lasts, I think, about like an hour and a half. And I think that going for, I don't know, $85 or $90 or something like that.
Wow. Look,
people, don't realize what it costs to produce these things.
Oh, I know for sure.
Yeah, you know what it costs to produce this stuff. And initial investment is horrendous.
Sure. Well, look, I think that's very reasonable. And I think that you've absolutely demonstrated that you have an incredible background on this. You have a long, proven track record. You have tons and tons of documentation that people can access at a fairly reasonable cost. There are some people out there who are in absolute poverty and they can't afford anything.
We've never turned anybody away because they didn't have money.
Wow. Okay.
If you can demonstrate that you don't have anything, we never refuse people like that. What the business manager usually does say, well, if you don't have that price, what could you contribute? Now, the reason behind this is we have found time and time again that if people do not make an investment of some amount, that they won't treasure the thing that they receive.
Right.
And so if somebody says, I don't have $150, you say, well, what do you have? They say, well, they might say, I have $20. Okay, then we'll do it for $20 because we want them to put value in for value received, because that's the only way that they'll treasure what they get.
I understand that. And I would imagine that if they succeed in using your system, that they're going to want to give back anyway when they get to that.
Yeah, that's fine. We don't need to have that kind of thing come back to us. What we want more than anything else is for people to have an understanding of it, find out if it's something that they can apply in their life. And if they do imply it, if they're successful with it, God bless them. Go bless somebody else. Well, I've got shoes. I got clothes. I got some place to live, and I got food. So if you receive some benefit from this, go help somebody else with it. Okay.
Regarding, you said that you filed liens, and the Attorney General said there's nothing I can do about this.
Yep.
So that's a level where the buck stopped. That's a level where somebody knew enough to know that this really works.
Absolutely.
Where did the Attorney General get that information from? It's not like everybody's running around with a Winston Trout DVD in their pocket.
Well, probably he looked at the lien itself where it says John Doe 1 through 20.
Okay, why does that matter?
He didn't want to be John Doe number 1.
Ah. But how did he know that you were actually doing something that was enforceable?
Well, the attorneys are very familiar with administrative due process. And so I'm sure when that Attorney General looked at the administrative due process and saw that the process itself was correct and complete, then that's why he said, there's nothing left to be done. You understand that this is prejudicial. It's prejudicial. Now, it could be taken into judicial, but all these private administrative processes we do are prejudicial, and we try to settle it on the private level. Again, going back to the New Testament. What did it say about there in problem resolution? It said, go to your brother first. If you can't settle it that way, go to arbitrators. If you can't settle it, with arbitration, then and only then go to court. And so we're out here trying to resolve these things between our brothers. And if we have to, then we go to arbitration. And then if you think, if worse comes to worse, then you go to court, but only as the last resort.
Well, the Federal Reserve people could basically flip you the middle finger and say, sure, you want to file liens against us, but hey, you're just gonna bounce off our back, and we don't give an F what you do.
Tell it to the Pentagon.
Right.
Winston is a pacifist in that respect. I'm not going to hit somebody on the head with a club over this, but the Pentagon might.
Right. So in other words, these people, this cabal, they created this system. They know this system probably, I imagine that there are guys who know everything that you're saying on the inside because they created that system, and they can't stop that system from being used against them if someone has the knowledge and if someone has the backing, which in this case would be the Pentagon.
Yep. It's law, merchant law.
Right. It regulates commerce and trade.
It's substantive. It's not fiction. It's all in substance. See, when I was talking to Keith about that situation, because he had the original contract for that gold, for the 4%, I said, Keith, look at that and see how that 4% was to be returned. Was it in money or anything else? And he said, it doesn't specify. I said, well, gold was given, so gold will be returned. So when we wrote that lien, then the return on the 4% was to be paid in gold. Is all in substance. So we didn't go into any kind of fiction whatsoever with that.
Well, I think what I'd like to do, Winston, is I think this is like chapter 1, and I'd like to have another chapter. And I think what would be awesome is if we could get you and Jordan Maxwell together and talk about this where both of you can ping pong off of each other, because I would love to have had his input in this discussion, because he's been lecturing on this stuff just like you have, and there's a lot of things that he would toss in quickly that I think would help to add context. So are you open to that in the future?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I was on a seminar with Jordan. He did one day and I did the other, and it was back in, about 2001 or 2 down in California. So I met Jordan one time, and we shared a podium one time. So yeah, I'm open to it.
Okay, great. Look, I think that people are probably going to be confused. I think it's really important that we get the transcript. I feel like once we established the thoroughness of your knowledge and the fact that you're already out there making this work, I think maybe people are starting to get a sense of this and starting to get a sense that, hey, we're not making this up. The attorneys and the people who are trying to tear these liens apart simply don't understand the legal system that the cabal actually created and is using, and whether they like it or not, and whether they want to or not, this system is now being used against them, and it's being enforced by what I'm calling the good guys, which would be people in the Pentagon who want to see freedom and want to see their children have a world that we can all live in peace and in harmony.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if you get that transcript, maybe you could send it to me so I can go over to make sure that I didn't slip a word or use a wrong word. I'm
sure that our transcribers are not going to understand all the things that you said, and there's probably going to be some little things that need to be clarified. So
yeah, so that'd probably be a good idea.
So this is a process. I'm not entirely sure whether to put it out just as audio first or whether it should come out with the transcript at the same time, because I think people are going to get lost in it. There were some places where you were speaking really fast, and unless you're reading it, you're probably not going to be able to keep up with it fast enough. But nonetheless, I think I probably can put the audio out as long as I give a disclaimer that says you might get really frustrated listening to this, you might get lost, and it may not be something that you really want to try to listen to as much as something you can read where you take your time And we will try to stock it up with some links and some things people can click on to go back and follow up and do the due diligence. But
sure, I've looked at the things you put up before, David. You do a masterful job. I got to say, you do a great job. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I know you got to bust out the door. You have a personal issue that's urgent, and I want to respect that. So I will end our interview at this time. Do you have any final statements you'd like to make here?
Oh, just, thanks for the effort of all the people that are trying to make the world a better place. My appreciation goes out to you.
Well, I thank you for getting involved and being willing to do this. It's very brave. And I think that one last statement from you about these mass arrests. So many people simply cannot believe that this is going to be done. Do you yourself believe that this actually is going to be done?
Absolutely.
And why?
This has been on the horizon now for a number of years. I think the real factor here is the technology that Drake had developed so that the military could come in and not have to deal with the civil problem. You understand that the military cannot intervene until the civil government has been deposed. And so the technology that Drake had come upon there was facilitated the deposition of the civil government so the military could intervene.
Right.
In the past, we've gone to the military with habeas corpus and various other things, and they would come back almost every time and say, we cannot help you at this time. And we were always in a quandary, wondering what the right time would be. But now it's been demonstrated, through what Drake had developed there, the deposition basically of the civil government, so that the military could intervene without breaching the civil government.
Well, some of the paranoid and angry comments that we get is, "Oh my God, you're trying to overthrow the government." And it's funny because they realize that we're dealing with a completely criminal enterprise here, but then as soon as anyone tries to oppose it, they don't want it to be touched.
Yeah, well, I think the key to the people would be to go into the United States Constitution and look at the oath that's in Article 2, and then look at the oath in Article 6 and see which one the present president actually took. He only took an oath as a corporate employee. We have never. I mean, if Jordan wants to get into a conversation about conspiracy, we would need to go right back to 1788 and 89 to the Constitutional Convention. Why did they come up with a 14-year requirement instead of 12? I mean, 14 is not a Masonic number. 12 is, 13, so forth. Why did they come up with a 14-year requirement on that first presidency? But you go back and you find out that right from the start, George Washington took the Article 2 oath. We have not had a man who has been qualified or who would take the Article 6 oath as President of the United States of America. So if people want to start on their journey, just go read the Constitution. Go read Article 2 and go read Article 6.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get off onto another subject.
Yeah, well, this has been very fascinating, and I really want to thank you for participating.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a real pleasure.
I think this is an investigation that's ongoing. I'm going to be interested to see the transcript and start following up on some of this stuff because I am one of those people who want to educate myself.
Great.
So I'm really looking forward to that process, and I thank you for facilitating that for us.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Winston. This is David Wilcock, DivineCosmos.com. And Winston, if you could give us your website again.
It's WSSIC.com, which stands for Winston Shrout Solutions in Commerce.
Terrific. Thank you, and till next time, buddy.
Okay.
All right, very good.